Hi there, welcome back to Diamond Ridge Studios. In today's tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how I paint brown model horse eyes. The eye of the model horse is one of my favorite parts to paint as it really brings the model to life. I will be doing a separate tutorial in the future on how to do blue eyes. Here's what you'll need for this tutorial. So you're going to need a black paint. I am currently using the Liquitex Heavy Body Mars Black. Then you're going to need some red oxide, also from the Liquitex Heavy Body series. What you really need is just kind of a reddish brown color. And then I'm going to be using, again from the Liquitex Heavy Body series, I'm going to be using Light Portrait Pink, and that's basically just a pale pink, kind of like this. For the fine details of the eye, I'm going to be using a few metallic paints. This is a metallic bronze. I'm going to have a metallic gold. And these little paints are from the little children's painting sets, I believe. I just had them, so I figured I might as well use them up before I get to paint of these colors. And then the last color is a metallic blue. Since I do not have a metallic blue, I've been using a metallic turquoise and a metallic purple mixed together to create metallic blue. That's all you're going to need for the paints. We're going to be mixing these up in varying ratios, so that way we get the colors that we need for the eye rather than having 20 different tubes of paint all in different colors. For this traditional model, I'm using a size 1 Robert Simmons round brush, but if you have a size 1 round brush, well, that should work pretty well. If you're using a smaller model, you might want to use, this is a makeup brush, but you can basically get a size 0 fine tip or round small brush. What I use to mix my paint on is a piece of tinfoil. You're also going to need a paper towel and a model. This is the American Nightmare. He is a custom Idolchus that I did a while ago. The final thing we're going to need is some form of gloss varnish. I use the Liquitex Gloss Medium and Varnish. And without further ado, let's get right into the tutorial. Okay, so now we're going to mix up the first color that we need, which is going to be a salmon pink color so that we can do the corner of the eye. I'm going to be using the Light Portrait Pink and the red oxide in a ratio of 3/4 of the portrait pink and 1/4 red oxide. Like this. So we're gonna need, we don't really need a lot, so just gonna mix up a small amount. So this is our portrait pink. And now we have a small amount of red oxide. About that much. With this you can be a bit approximate, and if you have to go in and add more, add more. Doesn't really matter that much. So how I'm going to mix this is I'm going to dip my brush in the water, get a very small amount on the tip of this brush. This is the size 1 Robert Simmons brush, in case you're wondering. I'm just going to mix these two colors together. The way I'm mixing it together is I'm just doing some small circular motions, just kind of blending the two together so that now they are the color that we want, which is this salmon pink. Okay. And then I'm just going to rinse off my brush in the water and then just wipe it off on the paper towel. Okay, so one of the biggest tips I can give you when painting model horse eyes is do one step on one side, and then while the first side is drying, do the next side, and then you can just go back and forth, and it saves a bunch of time. Okay, so I just have him resting on some paper towels so that he does not get dirty. And we're just going to take some of our salmon pink that we mixed up and put a little bit on the tip of the brush. Since he's a traditional, I'm going to be using a lot more than I would be if I was painting a Schleich or even a classic size model. So about a little dot on the tip of the brush. And then we're just going to go in. The salmon pink is going to be used to create that little bit of pink in the corner of the horse's eye when they're looking back. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start in the very corner of the eye and just draw it, just slightly pull it out over the rest of the eye. We don't need to cover the entire eye. I'm just going to kind of paint so that I have enough to carve it out when I go in with the black next. Okay, so this is kind of what it looks like now. He has pink over his eye, and if you're wondering what this little white dot over here is, he had a little accident and I'm just going to repair that later. We're just going to be taking some of the Mars Black and putting a small dot right there. Oh dear, you can't even see it. It's right here. But we don't need a lot because we're just going to be carving out the pink. Okay, so I'm going to get about the same amount that we did for the portrait pink on the tip of my brush. About that much. Again, if your horse is smaller, you are not going to need nearly as much. When I carve out where I want the brown part of the eye to go, I always start in the back corner and work my way towards the front corner of the eye. That way, if I decide that I want the horse to be looking more behind him, then I don't have to be like, oh, well now I gotta go in again with the pink. And once you get to the point where you think you have enough pink showing, you're just going to want to nicely round out the edge of the black. That way it doesn't look like there's a random jaggedy edge. So I'm gonna go and do the other eye, but this is kind of how much pink I wanted to have showing. I'm going to go in using the bronze, and I'm just going to create a nice big highlight on the black. So we're gonna get a decent amount of bronze on our brush. So you're gonna want to get about this much bronze on your brush, depending again on the size of your horse. I'm going to paint over the black, leaving a small rim of black as a barrier between the pink and the bronze. So I'm going to just start here. And usually what I do is I like to start in the middle of the black and work my way out to the black rim. And then be small. Doesn't have to be a very big line, just a little bit of definition between the two. There we go. So see, I left a small rim of black in between the pink and the bronze. Okay, so while the bronze is drying on both eyes, because the metallic paint does take a bit longer to dry, we are going to be creating a very thin, dark brown color. So we're going to be using some of the Mars Black and the red oxide in a ratio of 3/4 Mars Black and 1/4 red oxide. About that much right over here of the Mars Black. And then you're going to take a small tiny amount of the red oxide. It looks like there's a lot of red oxide there because I spread it around a little bit too much. Since we want this to be a really thin color, I'm going to be dipping my brush into the water and getting a lot of water on the brush. So when I mix this together, it will become a bit thinner and more watery. And so the idea here is to create a really dark brown, like so, and so it looks almost black. And to mix it together, I'm just mixing in circular motions like we did for the salmon pink color. And I want it to be really thin, so I'm going to be continually adding more water until it gets like kind of a very thin consistency. And so now I'm just going to rinse off my brush so I don't get too much on the model. And then we are going to go in and paint over the bronze. I'm going to dip my brush into the water and get a fine, very fine amount on the tip of the brush, and then I'm going to dip it into our very thin brown. I'm going to get a very small amount of this brown on the tip of my brush, a very tiny amount. And we're going to be using that to cover the bronze. And the idea with this is you want a very thin layer over the bronze. We're not going to go over the black or the pink at all with this. The idea is that you can see kind of some of the bronze coming through the brown. There you go. Okay, so while our paint dries, because water paint takes a lot longer to dry, we are going to mix up a lighter brown to go over the dark brown with. So we're just going to take some of our dark brown that is already mixed and add a little bit of red oxide. And the idea here is to create a darker reddish brown. We're going to take kind of a big gloop of the dark brown and we're going to mix that in with the red oxide, creating again kind of a reddish brown color. So you can kind of see it's kind of like imagine like a very bright chestnut color. So I'm going to just thin it out again using the water, dipping it into the brush, then just using circular motions to mix the water into the paint. And that's about good. We want it to be kind of liquidy and easy to push around. Okay, so now we are ready to apply the red. So I'm going to get a very, very tiny amount on the tip of my brush. So a very small amount of the reddish brown that we just mixed up. And now I'm going to paint in the center of the eye where we want the pupil to go. So in the center of the brown bit of the eye. We're not touching the pink at all. So we're going to just kind of lightly paint it in the center here, kind of defining the area around where we want the pupil to go. So this kind of adds a bit more highlight to the model. The method I'm using to paint this on is I'm just lightly brushing the very tip of my brush in a kind of a downward motion along in like little lines along the eye. So the next step is we're going to be creating the pupil of the eye, and I'm going to be using the Mars Black again. I'm going to put a small dot of it over here. And then we're going to be dipping our brush into water, and we're going to try to get a decent amount of water on there. And then I'm going to dip my brush into the Mars Black and get a small amount on the tip of the brush, the very, very tip, right there. And if you were doing a smaller model, you would be using the size 0 brush that I showed you earlier. And so basically in the area that we outlined before with the reddish color, I'm going to just do using the same motion, which is kind of like an up and down motion in lines using the black and the tip of my paintbrush. I'm going to create the pupil. And the pupil doesn't have to be an exact straight line, it's actually more like an oval. So just kind of be a bit creative with the way you do the pupil. And there we go, that's his pupil. You can't really see it, but it is there. And then we're going to go in and outline the pupil in a moment. Okay, so now we're going to be highlighting the pupil using the gold. And I'm going to, using the very, very tip of my brush, get a small amount of gold on the tip of my brush. I'm gonna get about this much gold on the, and I'm going to go under and over the pupil and just create a small thin line of gold. And I'm just lightly brushing against the eye, trying to get as thin a layer as possible. There we go, and his eye is highlighted on this side. Now we're going to be creating the reflection in the pupil of the eye. We're going to be taking, this would be where you'd use your metallic blue, but since I don't have metallic blue, I'll show you how I create it using purple and turquoise. So I'm going to take, the ratio for this is half purple, half turquoise. I'm going to take half and half, and then I'm going to mix them together. So I'm going to mix these two colors together until they kind of resemble a metallic blue color. This is kind of like almost like an aqua metallic blue. It does. Okay, so how we're going to create the reflection in his pupil is we're going to create a small kind of line in the center of his pupil, like that. And then that is done, and I just lightly brushed that on in a straight line, Just kind of like that. Okay, so once the eye is dry, you're going to want to gloss the eye to give it that extra added realism. So the way I do this is I usually do it in 2 to 5, sometimes up to 10 coats of gloss. And make sure that your paintbrush is completely clean and your model's eye is completely dry. Otherwise, you're going to have to go back and redo everything, because if the gloss is tinted by a certain color of paint, then your whole entire eye will become tinted by that color. And same goes for if the paint is not dry, the gloss will pick up the color and mix it all over the eye. You're going to want about that much gloss on your brush for this first coat over the eye. And I usually use about this much for every single coat, and then it slowly adds a bit more dimension and extra depth to the eye. So what you're going to do is you're going to want to paint it over the eye where it is brown. The pink is going to stay unglossed. And so I just lightly brush it over the eye, and it's going to seem like it's thick and not completely clear. And that's kind of natural for the gloss. And sometimes if you get a little spill of gloss, that's okay, just quickly rinse off your brush and pick up the gloss. Move it to somewhere else that you want it. And there we go, and that gloss is just going to dry, and when it is dry, it will be completely clear